A trench collapsed in Toronto leaves 2 construction workers with serious injuries. We're live at the scene with more on the dramatic rescue tonight.
Driving downtown just got a little trickier. The intersection of King and Church, it'll now be fully closed for about 4 weeks. This is earlier than expected. We'll have more on the work being done and tell you how long that's going to last.
All of Canada's premiers are pitching their ideas to the Prime Minister today as Canada continues to be hit by U.S. tariffs. We have more tonight on the First Minister's meeting.
This is Live at 5. Good evening. I'm Bakari Savage.
And I'm Lena Latafat. Thanks for joining us and welcome to Live at 5. 2 workers, they're in hospital after being rescued from a collapsed trench at a job site in the West End.
CP24's Beatrice Vaisman joins us live from the scene on Edmund Avenue near Weston and Jane. Beatrice.
Bakari, Lena, the investigation still underway here at the scene. Firefighters and police, they have cleared, and now it's up to the investigators with the Ministry of Labor to determine not only what happened, how it happened, and did something go wrong. Clearly, it did. It caused these 2 workers to become trapped up to their waists in this trench. Here's the hole behind me. I mean, a heavy piece of machinery still at the scene in the exact spot it was once, this situation happened. The hole, I'm told by Toronto fire officials, about 10 feet deep. And what the platoon chief, who I spoke to, made very clear is that there was no shoring in place here in this hole. There is shoring off to the side. And just a few minutes ago, I watched as investigators with the Ministry of Labor were actually measuring it as well. From what we know, this was a situation that started. It was around 11:40 this morning. It took about an hour to free the first of the 2 workers. He's a man in his 20s, approximately 25 is what I'm told. He's the one who suffered the most significant injuries. He was rushed to hospital in critical condition, Lena and Bakari. A second man, a man in his 50s, was also freed about 40 minutes after the first worker. He's been taken to hospital with serious but not believed to be non-life-threatening injuries. It took firefighters with the help of some specialized equipment quite some time to get these men out. The reason being, we heard it was an excavation site, that the trench was incredibly unstable. And this was, a very intricate rescue, essentially by hand, is what the platoon chief told us, using a small shovel to get these 2 men out once they managed to secure the actual trench. And so here's a bit of what I heard from platoon chief Steve Buckingham.
So it is a very difficult rescue because it's very confined in the amount of space, and then when you're putting the shoring and that in, you're making less and less space. Necessary in order to be able to put personnel in there to work safely. We don't want a secondary collapse. In the city of Toronto, there is probably nowhere you'll find that the land hasn't been disturbed at one time or another. So it is very unstable. These types of excavations are. So we wanted to make sure that we made it safe. We were able to access, and then when you're digging it out, you're digging it out by hand.
And so here's what this construction site looks like now. When we first got here, during around 1 o'clock, Lena and Bakari, it looked very different. There was ladders up that were put here by Toronto Fire. There was ropes and other heavy machinery brought in to stabilize the site in order to undertake this rescue. What was happening here? I'm told it was private contractors. This is going to be a housing site eventually. They were here doing some utility work. And as I mentioned again, the Ministry of Labor investigators, they are still here at the scene. They're going to figure out what happened, what went wrong, and if there's anything negligent or criminal in this trench accident here, trench collapse. Back to you.
All right, just the beginning of that investigation then. Beatrice Vaisman live in the West End tonight. Thank you, Beatrice. And 3 people were injured when a scaffolding collapsed in the beach this afternoon.
Yeah, Chopper 24 was over the scene at Queen Street and Silver Birch Avenue. Several ladders and scaffolding could be seen behind a home where work was being done on a rooftop. And paramedics tell us that 3 men have serious injuries.
Well, the intersection of King and Church is now closed to traffic and will be for much of the summer. That's all thanks to construction.
And CP24's Phil Perkins joins us live from the newsroom with more on what this closure means and why it started so much sooner than planned. Phil.
Well, firstly, it feels like every Torontonian, when they wake up, not only do they have to check, the date, the weather, what's on the calendar, they also have to check to see, what construction zones are opening up, which ones are shutting down, what lanes are open or closed, what subway lines are open or closed, because every weekend there's a subway line that is closed for track work. And this is the latest bit of roadblocks, literally, for people trying to get to and from work or to school. King and Church. CP24 was over this scene there. It is one of the main intersections if you do commute into the downtown core, the financial district, obviously King Street West. If you want to go to St. Lawrence Market or the distillery, that's one of the main intersections you might be going through. It's going to be closed to replace a 142-year-old water main, better sooner rather than later, of course. And this is going to result in it being shut down until around mid-August or so. It was scheduled to be closed in July, but they moved it up because of interference with some utilities. So they bumped it up a month. Whether it'll be done early or not sure, but currently the end date for this construction is mid-August. Here is Mayor Olivia Chow as to why they're doing this right now, and also to people who live in the area and rely on that intersection and the transit that flows through it to get to and from work.
Heavy traffic over there. Yeah. People are going to be late, affecting everyone's life.
I live very close by to this place, and this is my regular path for the gym as well as to work, because this is the main path for the streetcar, and I go to my work daily from this path.
Yeah.
And by closing this path, even by walking, this is be very, very hassle for me, because I have to just in case if I have to reach my office, just in the next intersection, I have to go all the way from some other intersection, which would be very difficult for me.
The water pipes are old. It needs to be fixed. It needs to be repaired. New one needs to go in, because pipes, it only lasts that long, right? And the city of Toronto have very old infrastructure. If we don't fix it now, if it bursts, God help us, right? So it needs to be done, and we're doing it now. And just like the Gardner, if we don't fix those bridges, it could fall down.
And as we know, that is still ongoing, the Gardner renovations. And also, when it comes to diversions, in terms of your live news, what's it all about? Anyways, diversions due to this renovation is the 504C and D are all diverting around the intersection. The way that I'm diverting the newsroom personnel's name, I will not name. I won't name them. Maybe I will. Maybe I'll say something that what it rhymes with, right? No, I'm not going to do that. We're all friends. But it just happens. We just got to everyone's kind of like in a newsroom now, Bakari and Lena, when it comes to commuting in Toronto. You have to think on your feet.
Yeah.
So that intersection's closed, go somewhere else or bike.
You gotta learn how to navigate the curveballs, as you just learned, right, Phil?
Yeah, that's what it's about.
All right, CP24's Bill Perkins and company, live from the newsroom.
Such a pro you are. Thanks, Phil. It's 5:08 now, 23 degrees. You're watching Live at 5.
Well, Prime Minister Mark Carney and Canada's premiers met in person for the first time today since the election. We're going to tell you what the leaders talked about after the break.
NDP MPP Saul Mamakwa was thrown out of the legislature today as the government moves to further limit debate on its controversial mining bill. Here's a look at what happened.
Last week, the government said that they respect First Nations, that they respect treaty rights. Speaker, we know the Premier is telling untruths to First Nations about...
I will ask the member to withdraw.
I'm not telling the truth.
But that's the truth.
I will ask the member to withdraw.
That is the truth. Rowing.
I will ask the member to withdraw.
Speaker, Premier is telling untruths. That's the truth.
Mamakwa was ejected after being named by the Speaker. Some fellow MPPs applauded him as he was escorted out.
Well, Bill 5, which is what this is all about, would give the government power to suspend provincial and municipal laws for projects in certain areas and remove some endangered species protections. It's one of many laws getting fast-tracked before the legislature rises for a summer break. Last week, the NDP and Liberals used procedural tools to halt committee meetings. The government House Leader is now stepping in to limit further committee time. The bill would go back to the House with just 1 hour of debate and a final vote the very same day. We heard about this from Ontario NDP leader Margaret Stiles. She's really slamming the PC's move to push through the controversial mining bill. She was also joined by Indigenous leaders and the head of the Ontario Federation of Labour today.
We tried to give them a chance to do the right thing. But now the government is using every measure possible to force this bill through. They're limiting debate. They're cutting down consultation completely. They're going to shove this bill through so fast without any more debate or discussion. And the leaders that are joining me today have been sounding the alarm since this bill was announced that this is a bad idea, that there is no fixing Bill 5, and that the only right thing to do is to scrap it and go back to the drawing board.
We're here to basically tell the Premier and his government that going around obligations to treaty to get to what he wants is not going to be stood for. I've heard him on the weekend saying that this bill is going to be good for all Ontarians. Obviously, he didn't include Indigenous people in his comments. And when he speaks of Ontarians, he's not talking about the Indigenous people.
Madam Speaker, in no way does Bill 5 infringe on treaty rights or compromise the duty to consult. And in no way, shape, or form do we consider the duty to consult red tape. She's actually right about that. We know because over the past 6 years, we've moved major resource projects, particularly mines, across important starting lines because we've had the full cooperation of First Nations most proximal to those resource development projects, including and especially the Watay Power Line, which I know the member from Keewatin was particularly happy about on several occasions, with his big infectious smile, taking credit for the work this government's doing to put good legacy infrastructure in isolated, remote First Nations communities.
And once it passes, the Ford government says that it'll honor its duty to consult by meeting with First Nations during the summer.
Well, Canada's premiers pitched their ideas to Prime Minister Mark Carney today as they met for the first time since the election.
And for more on this, we're joined live by CP24's Andrew Brennan joining us from the newsroom.
Andrew, welcome back. Good to see you, and take it away.
Hi, you both. I have missed you terribly. Just as we get into the news, I know. I missed me too. But okay, we actually have a story, and this is a pretty big one, except it's the substance that when we have meetings like this, very, if not almost uniformly, we have a lot of talk, and then the question in what comes out of it. Now, this is the first time that 13 premiers are meeting with the Prime Minister since he was elected to that post, although he, of course, was appointed as Liberal leader and the PM before that. However, the question is what consensus will be built here in the face of the tariff threats from the United States, even questions on Canada's sovereignty overall looming in the background here. But making consensus in Confederation is difficult. We're expecting in moments from now to actually hear a little bit about what transpired inside during the meeting. However, in terms of what expectations there were, here's the Prime Minister saying what this is supposed to convey, at least for Canadians in the weeks to come.
That's what this meeting is about. Building a stronger Canadian economy, building one Canadian economy, and I really want to salute the leadership around this table. I can't keep up with the flurry of announcements of free trade agreements between provinces and across the country. The federal government will do its part, tabling legislation very shortly to eliminate federal barriers to interprovincial movement of goods and people, and also to put in place an ability to advance projects of national interest.
I always say united we stand, divided we fall. We're going to have great discussions. I know Canadians want hope, they want prosperity, they want opportunity, and I feel if everyone cooperates and collaborates, we're going to make that happen.
You may hear a little bit of an echo here because similarly to what we're hearing with Bill 5, We heard not just moments ago Vashi Kapelos, our senior political correspondent in Saskatoon, interviewing the head of the AFN Grand Chief, Cindy Woodhouse. Woodhouse saying that if these nation-building projects and the speeding up of the timeline that Mark Carney, our Prime Minister, is talking about does happen, that the Government of Canada and the specific provinces and territories as well, Alina and Bakari, both would have to ensure that Indigenous sovereignty and treaty rights are respected, or this could be mired in court cases for years to come. Back to you.
Okay, joining us live from the newsroom, CP24's Andrew Brennan. Andrew, thank you very much. It's 5:16, 23 degrees. This is Live at 5.
Police forces in the GTA are increasing their presence at religious sites following what the FBI is calling a targeted terror attack in Colorado. Our crime analyst, Steve Ryan, he's going to join us after the break with more local reactions. Stay with us.
A man accused of using a makeshift flamethrower to attack a rally for Israel hostages in Boulder, Colorado, has been charged with a federal hate crime.
The FBI says 45-year-old Mohammed Sabri Solomon told police he planned the attack for a year and specifically targeted what he called the Zionist group because he knew they'd be gathering in support of the hostages. He also told police he would do it again. Now, it is believed that he acted alone.
And police say that Solomon yelled "Free Palestine" before using the flamethrower and an incendiary device on the crowd. So 4 additional victims have been identified, bringing the number of injured to 12. And the injuries range from minor to serious. Investigators say that they found a dozen unlit Molotov cocktails near where he was arrested. And Toronto police say they are monitoring the situation closely. A statement reads in part, quote, "Our priority is the well-being and safety of our communities, and we continue to maintain a heightened and visible presence at schools, community centers, and places of worship across Toronto."
York Regional Police also weighing in, saying they'll also increase their police presence in response to this attack. They say our thoughts are with all of those affected by the tragedy, going on to say the safety and well-being of our community remains their top priority. So out of an abundance of caution, they will continue to maintain a heightened presence at places of worship and faith-based community locations across York Region. And for more on what this level of heightened security means in Toronto and other parts of the GTA, we now turn to our crime analyst, Steve Ryan, who's been following the story all day. What is the appropriate response here, Steve?
So a heightened police presence around mosques and synagogues. And we say mosques and synagogues because that's what the geopolitical conflict appears to be about over this past few years. And as reported in that Colorado incident, that is escalating. So police always watch and they learn and they adjust their strategies. So you will see a heightened police presence around mosques and synagogues, around communities, churches, schools, and community centers that are predominantly Jewish or Muslim. And that is just to make sure that everybody remains safe, and that also acts as a deterrence to those who may want to go into those communities to cause trouble.
Okay, so Steve, we've seen, south of the border, there was the murder of those 2 individuals in Washington, D.C. Mm-hmm. We have this situation in Colorado. Here, we've just, we've had a lot of, let's say, tensions rising with protests. How does all of this add up for police?
Eyes, lots of eyes, whether it is a pro-Palestinian demonstration or a pro-Israeli demonstration. The more police that are there, they can view what's going on. And what struck a lot of law enforcement managers who I've been in contact with over this past 48 hours is the amount of time that this man in Colorado was able to stand there with those Molotov cocktails before it was intercepted by the police. So he was allowed to act out on those threats, because there wasn't a lot being done to deter that. So here in Toronto, we just witnessed a large, and I'm showing it right now, we were showing earlier on the large police presence during that walk for Israel. And there were police at every corner. And where there were anti-Israeli demonstrators, those who were supporting Palestine at the intersection of Bathurst and Shepherd, there was an exceptional amount of police there because they anticipated that could be a hot spot. And the police watched, and they were able to prevent anything physically from taking place. So it shows you how important it is to have a lot of police officers, both in the crowds, covertly, or outside the perimeters, just watching what's going on.
That is so important. Steve Ryan, live in studio. Thanks so much for your analysis, as always, Steve.
You got it.
Okay, right now it is 23 degrees. This is Live at 5.
More than 25,000 people in 3 provinces have now been evacuated as dozens of wildfires continue to burn across the prairies. We're going to have more on the situation next. Wildfires have forced tens of thousands of people from their homes in Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta.
We've never experienced anything like this before. So it was very, very kind of scary.
More than 17,000 people have been forced out by fires across northern Manitoba, 8,000 people in Saskatchewan, and about 4,500 people in Alberta. In Manitoba, officials are having trouble finding places to stay for people. Indigenous leaders have called on the government to suspend upcoming conferences to make room in hotels for evacuees. Hot and dry conditions on the prairies are also making the firefight difficult. And Manitoba Premier Wab Kinew is describing the wildfire situation as serious, but says that the province is getting the support it needs.
All right, let's take you live to Saskatoon now, where Prime Minister Mark Carney and Canada's premiers are speaking to reporters this hour after their first in-person meeting since the election. Much of these talks focused on Donald Trump's tariffs. Let's listen.
Indigenous peoples to identify and expedite nation-building projects. To be deemed in the national interest, those projects should, amongst others, strengthen the Canadian economy, strengthen our autonomy, our resilience, and our security, provide undeniable benefits to Canada, have a high likelihood of successful execution, be a high priority for Indigenous leaders, and to drive Canada's clean growth potential. Under a new process, once a project is designated as being in the country's national interest, a new federal Major Project Office will bring together all relevant federal departments to provide a single set of conditions that must be met for those projects to advance. And the commitment is to proceed with the approval process for a maximum of 2 years under a new streamlined process that prioritizes federal resources to these most important of projects. We will also work towards one project, one review, including through new cooperation agreements with the provinces. The point is to build the certainty, the stability, and the ambition that builders need to catalyze enormous investment to make Canada into an energy superpower and to build the strongest economy in the G7. We had wide-ranging discussions. There was a lot of preparation for this meeting. We discussed a wide range of potential nation-building projects, including, and this is far from exhaustive, the Western and Arctic corridor, which, amongst other things, connects energy, critical minerals, and trade infrastructure, the Eastern Energy Partnership, critical minerals pathways, which include a range of critical mineral projects that premiers can speak to. The next stage of nuclear, from uranium to SMRs to large-scale nuclear, and a series of infrastructure investments for export diversification from ports to rails to last-mile roads. All First Ministers agreed that Indigenous partnerships and equity will be central to success. And upcoming federal legislation will mandate both meaningful consultation with Indigenous peoples, both during the process of determining which projects are in the national interest and developing the conditions for each project. The goal here is to get projects built faster so we can create more high-paying careers and greater prosperity for all Canadians. Avec notre nouvelle approche, nous allons mener à terme de grands projets et le faire à des vitesses que nous n'avons jamais vues auparavant. Nous allons relier nos provinces, nos territoires et nos communautés. Nous allons renforcer notre économie, créer de bonnes carrières et créer de la prospérité pour les Canadiens et les Canadiennes.
For Canadians.
This meeting demonstrated how we can give ourselves far more than any foreign government can ever take away. So we're in a position where we can build big, build bold, build one Canadian economy, and build now. Thank you very much. Merci, and I will now pass to Premier Ford.
Well, thank you so much, Prime Minister, for bringing us together. It was a very productive meeting. I also want to thank Premier Mo for your hospitality. We had a great time over the last couple of days, a lot of discussions moving forward. So I also want to thank all the premiers. We have an incredible group of premiers. We are united. We're going to move this country forward, the likes of which this country's never seen before. And how we're going to do this is making sure that we don't have federal duplication. As the Prime Minister said, let's get it done quick, fast, immediate, and that's exactly what we're going to do. Let's not forget that President Trump has declared an economic war on every single business, every single person in this country. And we need to do everything we can to fight against him. Again, what the Prime Minister said, and I agree, an illegal trade war. And I think the President's going to have a rude awakening. We're going to unleash our strengths, and that's be it mining, the pipelines across the country, infrastructure, roads, bridges, highways, and specifically the road to the Ring of Fire. So we had that discussion, and as I mentioned earlier on, the last couple times I talked to the press that, nothing's carved in stone at this meeting. There was great discussions, because I know the first question is going to be, what are the exact projects? I have all the confidence in the world. The Prime Minister and his team are going to bring back the list. They're going to sit down. They're going to discuss it to build these large national infrastructure projects from coast to coast to coast. The other area that we spoke about was bail reform. It's absolutely critical we keep our communities safe. It's each and every one of our jobs to protect communities, and that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to make sure the real bad guys, these violent criminals, go to jail. And people may have a drug addiction, we're going to support them. I'm not worried about them committing crimes as much as I am the criminals that are coming in from all over the country, all over the world, flying in and causing chaos in neighborhoods. And I'll speak just about Ontario on that issue there. But again, Prime Minister, I want to thank you. Working collaboratively and cooperating with all the premiers. I'm very, very confident. I want to tell the people of Canada, and in my case, the people of Ontario, there's hope. We're going to look at how we're going to move forward and implement as quickly as possible prosperity in our province and across the country. Again, I want to thank you, and I'll pass it back to you, Prime Minister.
Thank you very much, Premier. And I guess we'll pass to the press for questions.
Thank you. We'll now begin the question period. We'll take 20 minutes of question, 20 minutes de question. Judy Trin, first question.
Judy Trin, CTV News. Prime Minister, other than the premiers of BC and Quebec, there seems to be growing consensus in support of pipelines carrying bitumen east, west, probably north as well. Is the federal government at this point considering pipelines a project of national significance, and will you be sidestepping certain environmental requirements outlined in Bill C-69 to fast track such a project?
Well, the first thing to say is, and let me be a bit more specific, if I could, because and I will defer to the premiers to add, but the Western premiers and the premiers of the territories met and supported an approach. The Western Corridor, the Western and Arctic Corridor, effectively a corridor between port to port to port, from Pacific Northwest to James Bay to Grays Bay Point, and within that are opportunities in energy, critical minerals, and well beyond, and specifically within energy, opportunities, yes, for an oil pipeline to get to Tidewater. Now, within the broader context of national interest, the interest is in, as mentioned in the press release, decarbonized barrels. So working alongside forms of decarbonization for those barrels. That is absolutely in our interest. It provides diversification of trade partners. It provides the development of new industries. It provides economic activity across the West and into the North. So, yes, there's real potential there. We took up a good deal of our time in discussions and potential to move forward on that. And if further developed, the federal government will look to advance it. En ce qui concerne, c'est plus que les oléoducs. Il y a des initiatives.
There are initiatives, corridors, energy, for energy and critical minerals, for example, from in the north and in the west. At the end of the line, yes, there are opportunities, possibilities for pipelines, oil pipelines, including decarbonization
Premier Smith, perhaps you'd
initiatives.
like to respond. If I'm understanding correctly, Prime Minister, you are saying that you would fast track a project involving decarbonized oil through pipelines, decarbonized energy. And is that something that, Premier Smith, that you agree with, or do you feel that we need to get the bitumen out of the ground now as is, as soon as possible?
Well, let's call it the grand bargain, that we know that there is a group of oil sands companies that have been advocating for some time for what they call the Pathways Project that would decarbonize the production of their bitumen through the use of carbon capture, utilization, and storage, ultimately using hydroelectric or small modular nuclear to decarbonize, and then direct air capture for the last mile. I think the point I was making to the Prime Minister and my colleagues is that there's lots of ways to decarbonize, but the Pathways Project is an expensive project. It would cost anywhere from $10 to $20 billion to get built. And to make the economic case for that, having more egress with more barrels to be sold to Asia is the way to pay for it. If we had a 1 million barrel a day pipeline going to the Northwest BC coast, that would generate about $20 billion a year in revenues. And so that seems like a pretty good value proposition if both of those projects can proceed at once.
Next question, prochaine question.
Bonjour, M. Carnier, Louis Blouin de Radio-Canada. Vous dites que vous voulez bâtir une nouvelle unité canadienne.
You want to build a new Canadian unity, but the first assemblies said your bill to accelerate big national projects are a threat to their rights that are treaty protected.
All right, let's go over in terms of what we just heard the Prime Minister Mark Carney and Canada's premiers talking after today's first ministers' meeting in Saskatoon. That's where Canada's provincial leaders, including Doug Ford, pitched their nation-building priorities as Canada continues to be slammed by punishing American tariffs. The Prime Minister was just asked about fast-tracking pipelines. Is that of significant national interest? And the Prime Minister says, absolutely, there's real potential there. Also want to talk about what Premier Doug Ford said. He says, according to him, this was a very productive meeting, says, quote, let's not forget that President Trump has declared an economic war on every single business and every single person in this country. The Premier also talking about his priorities, including mining, pipelines, as we just heard about, infrastructure, and the road to the Ring of Fire. So for more on this, let's check in with CP24's Andrew Brennan, who's not only following the story very closely, you were also listening in live. Andrew, what did you take from that?
Well, one thing, Lena, you were talking about the possibility of pipelines, and really in a metaphoric or really in a rhetorical sense, we were seeing the laying of pipe work or laying the groundwork for future pipelines from not only the Prime Minister, who, you know, for anyone who may have read his book and talking about what values a country espouses based on their policy. Well, in terms of what Canada's clean potential is for future energy, that is something that he says is a priority for these nation-building projects. But at the same time, they do leave that door open for some form of pipeline to get bitumen from oil sands in Alberta to port or Tidewater. Now, we do have a little bit to show here from when Mark Carney, the Prime Minister, was talking about the nation-to-nation aspect of this, dealing with the many concerns that have been brought forward by not only hereditary chiefs of various First Nations, but as we heard today from the Assembly of First Nations and the Chief, Cindy Woodhouse, talking about what potential problems there could be if Canada doesn't adequately, in her mind, consult the Indigenous communities that call Turtle Island home. Here's how Mark Carney responded to that.
All First Ministers agreed that Indigenous partnerships and equity will be central to success. And upcoming federal legislation will mandate both meaningful consultation with Indigenous peoples, both during the process of determining which projects are in the national interest and developing the conditions for each project. The goal here is to get projects built faster so we can create more high-paying careers and greater prosperity for all Canadians.
Now, you did also hear a little bit at the end there, Lena, when we were starting to hear, say, from Alberta's Premier, Danielle Smith, about the changing tides or divisions about carrying oil and various carbon-emitting gases and otherwise across this country. But right now, it seems that the consensus is building when it comes to at least finding those nation-building projects. But as you heard at the top, when Doug Ford, our Premier, was speaking, we don't really have the list yet, and it's going to be a while. Back to you.
That information will be crucial. Andrew, thanks so much for this. It's now 5:41, 22 degrees. You're watching Live at 5.
And 2 workers are critically injured after a trench that they were working in collapsed. It happened this morning in the city's West End. We're going to have more of this just ahead. Well, 2 workers are in hospital after being rescued from a collapsed trench. This was at a job site in the West End.
CP24's Beatrice Vaisman joins us from the scene near Weston and Jane. And this was a very challenging rescue operation, Beatrice.
It was incredibly challenging, Lena. We heard this trench was unstable, that essentially rescuers had to work by hand to try to free these 2 men using all kinds of equipment, a small shovel, and it took some time. This is an incredibly intricate rescue. Let me show you what it looks like right now, because at this point, firefighters and police have left. The investigation is in the hands of the Ministry of Labor. We're showing you a live look right now of the hole. This is the trench where these 2 workers were trapped. Investigators with the Ministry of Labor are still here. It'll be up to them to determine exactly what happened, what went wrong, what led to this collapse, were all the appropriate protocols followed by these private contractors who were here at this site. Let's reverse here, because it was around 11:40 this morning that this just awful situation happened. There were some workers here. I'm told they're private contractors. They were doing some utility work in what will eventually become a housing site. And then the trench, the walls of the trench essentially collapsed and caved in on top of them, and they were crushed in waist deep approximately in this trench. When first responders got here, they had to first secure it, get it stable. They administered first aid to these 2 men. One of them is a man in his 20s, around 25, I was told. He was one of the 2 workers that was in worse shape. He was tended to immediately, but it still took about an hour after first responders got here to actually free him from this trench. And then about 40 minutes after that, the second worker, a man in his 50s, was freed as well. We heard from fire officials kind of what their biggest concern was as they were trying to save these 2 men's lives. And here's what we heard from the district commander, who spoke to reporters here at the scene around 2 o'clock.
When we're dealing with trench rescue, we are into a significant amount of earth on the human body. Everyone knows the term crush syndrome. So prior to us doing patient removal, it's vital that we get the medical treatment by pushing fluids, that when we start releasing all that material away from the body, we just don't have a sudden crash associated with crush syndrome.
And so what I heard later, Lena and Bakari, from the platoon chief who was here at the scene is that there was no shoring in place in this trench. What should have been in place, according to this platoon chief, is that box kind of in the corner there where you see a pair of investigators. That should have been in the trench, was in the process of being lowered into it. That's going to be a question for these Ministry of Labor investigators. We're told the hole is about 10 feet deep in total. Both of these men were transported to hospital. Initially, we heard that the man in his 20s was in critical condition, rushed to a trauma center. The man in his 50s still in serious condition, but not as critical. And so now the concern is exactly what led to this. There was other members from this private contractors group who were here giving statements to both police, fire, and to the investigators at the Ministry of Labor as well. So they'll be, again, trying to figure out exactly what led to this. Is there any negligence or criminality involved as well? Back to you.
Okay, CP24's Beatrice Vaisman reporting live. Thank you, Beatrice. Well, 3 people were hurt when a scaffolding collapsed in the beach. It happened this afternoon.
Chopper 24 over that scene at Queen Street and Silver Birch Avenue. Several ladders and scaffolding can be seen behind a home where work was being done on a roof. Paramedics tell us 3 men have serious injuries.
And a man accused of using a makeshift flamethrower to attack a rally for Israel hostages in Boulder, Colorado, has been charged with a federal hate crime.
The FBI says 45-year-old Mohammed Sabri Solomon told police he planned the attack for a year and specifically targeted what he called the Zionist group because he knew they'd be gathering in support of the hostages. He also told police he would do it again. It's believed he acted alone.
And police say that Solomon yelled "Free Palestine" before using the flamethrower and an incendiary device on the crowd. 4 additional victims have been identified, bringing the number of injured to a dozen. And the injuries range from minor to serious. Investigators say they did find a dozen unlit Molotov cocktails near where he was arrested.
Now, there's been a lot of reaction here at home from our local police services. Let's get to that now. We're hearing from Toronto Police issuing this statement saying they're really keeping a very close eye on the situation, going on to say our priority is the well-being and safety of our communities, and we continue to maintain a heightened and visible presence at schools, community centers, and places of worship across Toronto.
York Regional Police also saying it'll be increasing police presence in response to the Colorado attack. Quote, "Our thoughts are with all those affected by this tragic event. The safety and well-being of our community remains our top priority. Out of an abundance of caution, we continue to maintain a heightened presence at places of worship and faith-based community locations across York Region." Right now, for more on what this level of heightened security means in Toronto and other parts of the GTA, we now turn live to CP24's crime analyst, Steve Ryan. Steve, in Colorado, we saw it took quite a while for police to actually get this suspect because he had time to stand there with no interference.
Yeah, that's right. And that's a great point. So generally speaking, when you police large crowds, sometimes you need to make a judgment call. Do we react now if there's criminal behavior, or do we wait, identify who this person is, and arrest them later? Having said that, if there's an imminent threat of bodily harm, which this clearly was, the police need to act right away. So what's confusing to police managers that I've spoken with over the last couple of days is the lack of police presence at this demonstration in Colorado. So they're asking the same questions. A man presents what appears to be Molotov cocktails. Why weren't there officers present with eyes on that crowd to intercept and arrest him before he can cause any damages? So you raise a good point. This is why it's important for there to be a large police presence at these gatherings. And when there's not, this is what could happen.
We've seen terrible hate crimes like this unfold in the U.S. recently, Steve, some of them fatal, as was the case in Washington. And then we see a response here at home, police services saying, look, we're stepping up our security. What exactly does that look like? And what should the community know about that response?
Yeah, great question. So there'll be a heightened police presence at synagogues, mosques, and community centers and gathering places and schools where it's predominantly Jewish people or people of the Muslim faith. And this is because of the threats that we are seeing across the globe, quite frankly, and down in the States with regards to the tensions between those two groups. So the heightened police presence will ensure safety. You might see command posts being set up outside of certain locations as well, which will reassure people that the police are there and they can act quickly if, in fact, a threat arises.
All right, CP24's crime analyst, Steve Ryan, joining us live in studio. Steve, thank you.
Well, police are trying to identify a suspect in connection with hate-motivated graffiti in Richmond Hill.
Investigators are trying to identify the person in these photos after anti-Iranian graffiti, was spray painted on several businesses. It happened on Yonge Street near 16th Avenue. and at the bus terminal near Young and Highway 7. This was early Saturday morning. The man is described as being about 5'10", with short brown hair, and is believed to be left-handed. He was wearing a green long-sleeve button-up, acid-washed blue jeans, and black shoes. Anyone who recognizes the man, you're asked to contact York Police.
A man has been arrested after allegedly assaulting multiple women at Union Station this morning. It's alleged that just before 9 o'clock, 23-year-old Kevin Thomas Delgado Pina approached several female victims and assaulted them unprovoked. Police say following his arrest, he allegedly made misogynist comments. The victims involved sustained non-life-threatening injuries. Pina has been charged with 10 counts of assault, and investigators believe there may be more victims, and they're treating this as a suspected hate-motivated offense.
Well, a teenage boy facing human trafficking and armed robbery charges has escaped a detention center in Brampton, and police have obtained authorization to share the photo of 17-year-old Lucas Neilas. In Toronto, police said that he escaped a facility near Nelson and Main Streets Friday. He's also facing charges across several jurisdictions, including Peel Region and Hamilton and Waterloo. And police say that he's known to frequent Etobicoke. So anyone with information on his location, contact police or Crime Stoppers.
Defense lawyers representing 5 hockey players accused of sex assault in London closed their case today, and no more evidence will be called.
Lawyers for the Crown and defense will make legal submissions next week. That's also when the judge is expected to set a date to deliver her ruling. Michael McLeod, Dylan Dubé, Alex Formenton, Carter Hart, and Callum Foote have pleaded not guilty to sexual assault. McLeod has also pleaded not guilty to an additional charge of being a party to the offense of sexual assault. The trial centers on an encounter with a woman inside a London hotel room June of 2018.
It's 5:53, 23 degrees out there. You're watching Live at 5.
Well, Europe's most active volcano has erupted again, sending ash spewing into the sky in southern Italy. An investigation into a previously unidentified First World War grave in France has revealed it belongs to a soldier in Toronto.
Captain William Webster Wilson is believed to have been killed by an artillery shell during the Somme offensive. Historical and archival research was used to confirm that the grave holds his remains. Wilson was born in Scotland but moved to Toronto in 1911, where he worked at the Bank of Montreal before enlisting in 1915. He was 25 years old at the time of his death. The Canadian Armed Forces says a headstone rededication ceremony will be held as soon as possible.
Wildfires have forced tens of thousands from their homes in Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta.
We've never experienced anything like this before, so it was very, very kind of scary.
More than 17,000 people have been forced from their homes across northern Manitoba, 8,000 people in Saskatchewan, about 4,500 in Alberta. In Manitoba, officials are having a hard time finding places to stay for people. Indigenous leaders have called on the government to suspend upcoming conferences to make room in hotels for evacuees. Hot and dry conditions on the prairies are also making the firefight pretty difficult. Manitoba's Premier Wap Kinew is describing the wildfire situation as serious, but says the province is getting the support it needs.
The amount of assistance that we've been getting so far is amazing, particularly the coordination with the Canadian Armed Forces and the federal government and firefighters stepping up. The challenge we have in Canada today is that the western provinces, including Manitoba, are fighting fires. We're seeing that in other regions of the country now. And I think as a nation, we're going to have to contend with future fire seasons being more and more like this, which means scaling up our firefighting capability.
Also, Quebec is sending firefighting teams to Alberta to help with wildfires. The province has already sent 2 water bombers to Saskatchewan, while 2 others are working here in Ontario.
Mount Etna erupted once again today, sending massive plumes of ash and smoke into the sky.
It follows a recent surge in activity in the Italian volcano, including what experts call explosions of growing intensity in recent weeks. A volcanic tremor was detected last night. No deaths or injuries have been reported. Mount Etna is one of the world's most active volcanoes, erupting several times a year.
New research suggests the odds of our galaxy colliding with one of its cosmic neighbors aren't as high as previously believed.
As astronomers say that there's a 50-50 chance of the Milky Way and Andromeda galaxies crashing together within the next 10 billion years. So previous theories stated a collision between the two systems was probable or even inevitable in about 4 billion years. Andromeda is 2.5 million light years from the Milky Way, but in cosmic terms, That's very close.
Fascinating stuff. 5:58, 23 degrees. Feeling like it as well. You're watching Toronto's breaking news, CP24.
Well, the city's marking the start of Pride Month celebrations with a flag-raising ceremony at Nathan Phillips Square this hour.
And you can see, you can see a number of speeches are underway. We're going to have much more on this coming up at 7 o'clock tonight, as it is Pride Month. Thanks so much for watching. CTV News at 6 is next.